formed in 1987 to help tribes pursue and promote conservation, development, and use of our agricultural resources for the betterment of our people. And within that, IAC has a couple of primary mission areas. Let me go to the next slide.
Yeah, and sorry, there might be a slight delay in the slides advancing.
No problem.
There it goes.
So Lottie, if you don't mind, I'm going to turn it over to you if you want to talk about our program areas.
Yes. Hey, hi everybody. This is Latasha with the Intertribal Agriculture Council. I am the American Indian Foods Program Director. A little bit about our programming. You know, we have a full, robust programming offerings. We have the youth professional development, the natural resources, policy and communications, and the American Indian foods. And more of like the boots on the ground that keep us all intact is our technical assistance network. And they've been just so amazing and phenomenal in everything that they've done or provide to our Native communities. And so, Dan, can you go ahead and share more about your experience as a technical assistance specialist and what kind of services are provided?
Yeah, definitely. And once we do this brief overview, then we're going to turn it over to USDA Rural Development and give a chance for their staff to introduce themselves, and that'll be the majority of the webinar and the presentation today is going to be both from Rural Development, and then we have a couple of tribes that are with us as well. We've got Red Cliff. Red Cliff in northern Wisconsin, right on Lake Superior, is going to be talking about how they used the value-added producer grant to do a feasibility study to help to really lay the foundation for eventually launching the Red Cliff Fish Company. We also have Forest County Potawatomi. We've got Dave Cronauer, their farm manager, is going to be talking about how they used a value-added producer grant for obtaining working capital to help to advance their operations. But a bit more of a basic background on the IAC Technical Assistance Network. We work with tribes and tribal producers to get better access to USDA programs. So just briefly in the context of this program to illustrate some of how that's happened, my first year on staff with IAC, 2011, I was going around Great Lakes region and saying, hey, this value-added producer grant is just a fantastic opportunity. And we ran into some stumbling blocks of with the local staff and looking and really, you know, is a tribe considered an independent producer or not? Where do tribes fit in on this? And so working with the USDA Office of Tribal Relations over the coming months, then we were able to develop, to look at some case studies and to clarify how tribes indeed fit in. So, you know, that's one example within this program, and have worked with quite a few other tribes on developing kind of the concepts and, you know, and really looking at how could this program combined with others possibly help to work with advancing your operations. We work across conservation, financing programs, and right now the food distribution program is a big one. Anyone who's tuning in, I definitely also recommend that you take a look at some opportunities of the tribal food distribution programs have an ability right now to put in requests for funding to be able to buy foods directly to put into that food distribution program on Indian reservations. You know, so producers who are on, that could be an opportunity as well, that you're not going to be able to put in the application, but you could work with some of those food distribution offices to help to source foods. So happy to talk more on that. And our contact info is going to be available at the end of the presentation. And I'm going to put my email in the chat in just a minute. Next slide.
Wonderful. So I just also want to give a quick high-speed overview of the American Indian Foods Program. The purpose of AIF is to promote and market American Indian and Alaska Native ag goods. AIF has 3 sub-programs to develop sustainable economics based on food production. We have 3 kind of pillars that build up this great program, which is our International Export Program, which is funded through the USDA Foreign Ag Service, and the Native Food Connection Programming. Together, we provide support, resources, technical assistance, promotional activities, and buyer engagement and introductions to encourage and increase market entry opportunities both abroad and domestically. Through our programming, we are working collaboratively and constantly seeking out new partnerships with Native-led conferences, organizations, retailers, and other institutions to encourage sourcing ingredients and products from Native-owned companies certified as made, produced by American Indian. Currently, we are actively shipping over 1,200 boxes to IAC conference attendees. So if you did attend the IAC annual conference, which was virtual this year, you should be receiving a box full of goodies here in the next week or so. And through generous donations and a state of Montana grant, we have shipped over 600 Native Food Connection boxes to tribes in Montana. You can see on the right-hand side of the right lower corner of the slide, that is a Native Food Connection box, and what we usually fill those boxes with are wholesome, high nutrient foods such as blue cornmeal, bison jerky, olive oil, tapir beans, wild rice, and tuna or salmon. Next slide. Oops. Yep, the Made Produced by American Indian Foods certification trademark is kind of that third tier, but also ties in our entire American Indian Foods programming. It is promoted and marketed heavily throughout our organization. It was introduced in '93, and this trademark certifies the authenticity and high quality of a product. There are 89 categories that are listed under the trademark, and currently we have about over 85 certified businesses. If you are interested in learning more about the various producers and businesses and would like to support Indian agriculture, or any businesses carrying the Made and Produced by American Indian trademark, visit our directory and support those producers. I'm so glad to be here, and I'm really thrilled that there are producers on the call today or on the webinar, joining this webinar, and I encourage you all to seek out this funding opportunity. Thanks so much.
All right, thank you, everyone. My name is Mike Daniels. I'm a management and program analyst for USDA Rural Development. Been around for quite a few years. I know Dan very well. I worked with Dan when I was stationed in Wisconsin. I currently work for the national office as one of the lead specialists for the Value Add Producer Grant. The purpose of the grant is to provide funding for economic and planning or working capital for ag producers to basically help ag producers increase their market and opportunity for their businesses. Greg, next slide. What isn't Value Add Producer Grant? It's not a technical assistance program. It's not for bricks and sticks. It's not, so we can't use it to purchase equipment or to build like for Red Cliff, their fish processing facility. We couldn't build that, but we can do everything within the processing of that value-added product. Greg, next slide. So what do we have available? We have a current notice that is out there that we have $33 million available, and the applications are due by the end of March. If everybody remembers back right after the holidays, Congress passed a appropriations bill, and the president signed it and became law. In that bill, there's additional funds that were made available to rural development, another $35 million under the LAMP program. So what's happening right now is we're working through the process by which we're going to be administering those funds. We anticipate that we will be getting a notice out that will be extending the deadlines for this application within the next month, a little bit over, where the deadlines will be extended. And so we're going to end up having about $76 million available total. We'll be funding, our intent is to fund the COVID money, the extra 35 million that Congress made available to us first. One of the caveats with that is there's a 10% match for those 35 million. The rest of our funding that is available will be with the dollar for dollar match. So to take away from this slide is to make sure that you stay aware of what's going on. Dan, we will be in contact with you when we know exactly what this is going to look like, and we'll share that with IAC so you can get that out to all of your members. What I would say for you is this is an opportunity, a huge opportunity to really look at a lot of funding this year, and something that in normal years we maybe had, in my history we've had like 15 million, 13 million, 30 million, but now we're up to 76 million that's going to be available this year. Something to take a look at, and we really do encourage applications from the tribal communities. We think that this is a huge economic driver that can help Native communities out. So next slide, Greg. If our contact from Red Cliff wanted to jump on here and kind of talk about what they've experienced.
Hey, Gabby, are you there? Well, I'm going to just, looks like we may have lost Gabby for the time being. I just want to give a little bit of background on this project, because I'd worked with Red Cliff on helping to get it moving and going. Red Cliff is right at the tip of the Bayfield Peninsula, right in Lake Superior, one of the most beautiful areas in the whole country. The first tribal national park was created by Red Cliff. But one of the challenges is that the fishermen over the years were just not getting a fair price for their product, and that market, that processing and wholesale market, was controlled by other entities, and so there just was a recognition that the value is not coming back to the entire community to the degree of what it could, and so. Had talked for over the course of really a few years, and then finally the pieces just fell together, and Red Cliff applied for and received the value-added producer grant, and then that was a planning grant that funded a feasibility study that laid the foundation for the for the tribe to then be able to get additional resources. And Gabby, I don't know if you're back with us, if you wanted to share more there. It looks like we may still be having a connection issue, but yeah, I just can say to go up there and to see that plant open up, and then to be able to pick up an order that first week, and we did a pop-up dinner featuring Lake Superior herring. We got so many positive customer feedback of that it was the best fish fry that they've ever had in their whole life. And we're also using a bow and arrow blue cornflower on that one. But now Red Cliff is really positioned to do more work of working with other tribes and building that intertribal commerce while supporting their tribal fishermen. So I think it's a great example of how this program can help to really launch something larger.
Greg, next slide.
So just a little bit more background on Red Cliff, and then I talked a bit about how that feasibility study was used. That feasibility study had had laid the groundwork, and then it was used to get both a some Keep Seagull funds through the first fast track on that Keep Seagull, and then it was also used to get the Rural Business Development Grant, which is going to be talked about a little bit later on. That Rural Business Development Grant can go toward equipment, business planning, and they also were able to receive an ANA, an Administration for Native Americans grant. So I think that this is one example, but those feasibility studies really can give you that clear vision and path forward of how can all of the different pieces come together. And you know, maybe sometimes some of them you may find that it's not the most feasible, and at least you're finding that out before you invest too much time and resources into something. Gabby, do you have your sound working there?
Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you.
Sorry about that. For some reason, my my browser was blocking the audio, and I could not, for the life of me, figure it out. Everything you said right so far has been totally on par. Thank you for kind of filling the void in there. I did want to just really reiterate what Dan had to say. This has been an incredible journey. It's been a process over quite a few years, and really to make everything happen truly did hinge on that initial value added producer grant that we got, where we were able to do that full feasibility study and really get a good solid look at the full picture of what it would take to get the Red Cliff Fish Company up and running. And really, it truly could not have been possible without that feasibility study and all of that background information that provided for us, because we were able to then leverage that information and turn it into additional funding and really create a successful project. And we probably couldn't have pulled it off without the ability to secure those other grants. It wouldn't have been as financially smart to proceed with this project without the ability to work with all of these additional partners. Like Dan said, I mean, you can see on this slide here, really the fruition of all of this hard work really coming together. You can see that picture there, the guy on the tractor. That's our very first day of operation back in November. And we've really just been hitting the ground running ever since. You can also see there a picture of the front of our facility and our delivery vehicle and the storefront. So the storefront is slowly evolving. We're looking to work with other native producers for products that'll go well with our fish and make those available to customers. And then moving forward, we're actually excited to take part in the webinar today just to hear more about the value added program. I wasn't involved with the initial value added grant, so we're exploring this opportunity again on the working capital side of things, because there's quite a bit more potential and a lot more opportunity out there for what we can continue to explore. So yeah, moving forward, we're looking forward to checking this out and seeing if we can pull off some more exciting stuff. So happy to answer any questions if folks have it. Sorry, I hopped in kind of late. So Dan, you kind of touched on all the other stuff for me, but I'll be on for the whole webinar. So thanks, guys.
Great, thanks, Gabby. You know, and then I think that really is a perfect segue to looking at, you know, at our next slide and looking at how can this value added producer grant, that was the planning one. How can this be used for working capital of implementing a project? And we'll turn it over to Dave Crow now. We're with Forest County Potawatomi.
Hello. So we also did a feasibility study. We didn't do it through the VAP grant. We did it prior to the farm actually opening. So that kind of laid the groundwork for everything we were able to do. Gave us that 10-year plan that we really used to leverage in the VAP application. So what we did was we did a working capital grant for about $150,000, and that was to pay for the processing of our animals. We took our grass-fed animals, pasture-raised animals, and converted them into value-added products, which is specialty cuts of meat, snack sticks, jerky. And at the time we started, we didn't have a storefront. We didn't have anything. We started producing And then we opened a storefront, which allowed us to sell the meat. And without the grant, we would not have been able to be profitable as quickly as we were. The grant really took a big burden off us and gave us that money to process the animals. And we're able to do that through a USDA facility that does a great job packaging. We took it out as a 3-year grant. So we started September 1st of 2018, and we will end this year on August 31st. One of the neat things I think we did for our in-kind match was we used the weight of the animals as our in-kind match. So the hanging weight, we used the USDA numbers to predict how much we were going to have. Now, the problem with that concept was the market changes every week, every day. So actually, when we did it, we put our pigs in at $1.54 a pound. Yeah, I haven't seen that yet. We've been at like 60 cents a pound, 69 cents a pound, stuff like that. So that kind of throws the number off. So we essentially had to increase volume, which was good because as we grew, we needed more. And right now we're processing about 6 animals every 6 weeks, which is kind of nice for our storage and keeping product fresh and everything. So we included beef, pork, chicken, turkeys, and eggs into this. And we've been able to get rid of all of our supply. We actually included, we added bison to the project, but we haven't been able to butcher very many of those. So they're kind of inconsequential. But when you look at the in-kind match, bison is the way to go because it holds its value a little bit better. Anybody has any questions about what we do, how we did it, feel free to contact me.
Thanks, Dave. I appreciate it. Did want to just, there was one question in the chat that the Q&A that I wanted to address. There was we wanted a little clarification on the 76 million that is available for this cycle. So yes, that's all through the value add producer grant. But we have the value add producer grant is funded in a couple different ways. One is through mandatory funding through the Farm Bill, and the second route is through appropriations, and that's described as discretionary funding that Congress gives rural development. So with the appropriations bill that was passed the end of December, the appropriations bill gave the value add producer grant another $35 million available to for COVID funding. If your farm has been affected by COVID, you'll be certifying to that. Those are going to be that's part of it. The rest of it is going to be value add producer grant. Will be with the 50% match. The COVID money. I know it sounds kind of confusing, but this is what the appropriators gave us, and this is what we're going to be administering. So the COVID money has a 10% match. The rest of the value added money is going to have the dollar for dollar match. So I know that seems a little bit confusing, but know that it's all value added funds, and that we do have a lot of money available. The other thing I wanted to say was, with Red Cliff and with Forest County, I'm just really happy to see them, that this is coming to fruition. I had mentioned when I started, I worked in Wisconsin, and I had the pleasure to work with both the tribes on these applications, and just see it as a big economic driver for the tribes, and very happy to see them coming to fruition. Who's eligible? We'll go back into our presentation now. Who's eligible? Individual.
Mike, before you go forward, sorry, somebody was just asking a follow-up question on that COVID eligibility determination.
Okay.
And I think it basically is going to come down to a self-certification where if your farm was adversely affected by COVID in any way, sales, what have you, then you'll be able to check the box and apply for the COVID reduced match funds. So it's going to be a pretty simple process. I think just checking a box if you're adversely affected. And I think most of us would be able to say that these days.
I don't think there's anybody in the world that can't say that they've been haven't been affected some way by COVID. So be that as it may. So moving on. So who's eligible? You have to be an ag producer, and you have to be involved in the day-to-day labor management field operation, and you have to meet one of the 4 eligibility types. We'll cover how tribes are qualify under this in a couple more slides. So Greg, you want to move on? So the applicant types, next slide. There's 4 of them. The first one is independent producer. So that's an individual agricultural producer or entity. So that is owned and controlled by ag producers that are directly involved with the day-to-day ag production. Next one, Greg. An independent producer entity can be a steering committee of individual producers who will form a legal entity. So say you have a group of a group of people that want to apply, but you don't know what your application type is going to be yet. We've done this in the past with, there was a poultry producer group of farmers that wanted to look at the feasibility of study to build a poultry processing plant. So we did, they formed a steering committee of easy for me to say, individual independent producers, and then they are awarded, and after the award they formed a co-op in order to be able to have the organization structure needed for the value add producer grant. An independent producer may be an ag harvester. They have to have the legal right to harvest the produce or the product. So either you have like a timber, you have to have somebody that's involved in the timber industry, you have to have timber rights to harvest, or fishing, you have to have the right to go out and harvest the fish in public waters. Greg, next one. So the next one is the ag producer group. We don't see a ton of these. This is where you have a nonprofit organization that represents a bunch of independent producers, something like, say, the Corn Growers Association. They could apply for a grant on behalf of independent producers and meet this definition. Greg, next slide. The next one is the farmer or rancher co-op. Again, that's like I had talked about with the poultry producers co-op. It's a business is owned and controlled by ag producers or incorporated within the state and cooperatively operated as a business. Greg? The last entity type is a majority owned business, producer-based business. That's basically if you, majority of the ownership structure is our ag producers. We see this a lot where you have an investor that has come into an organization. You have, say, 2 or 3 independent producers, and they need an investor group that is going to provide some capital into their ownership entity. The qualifier here is that the ownership has to be controlled by ag producers. So more than 50% has to be ag producers. Greg? All 4 applicant types must currently produce and own the more than 50% of the raw commodity used in the value-added product, and you have to own the product through the commodity state. So through the value-added processing of the value-added product. So say like with you're growing strawberries, you have to own that strawberry through the whole process. You can't sell the strawberry to a processor to make jam. You have to actually own the strawberry and produce the jam, or be in control of it by hiring somebody to produce the jam for you. For example, we've had ones where it had a cheese maker that was making great cheese in Wisconsin, and they wanted to apply cheese as a value-added product, but they didn't own the cows and they didn't do the milking, so they weren't eligible. All applicants must demonstrate increase in customer base and show that they're getting a higher value to the independent producer as a result of the value-added product. So instead of just taking it to market, taking your hogs to market, like for Forest County, that they're actually be able to show that they're taking in a higher value in a return to owner to the producer. Greg? So how did tribal applicants fit? Next slide. Tribal entity must meet the definition of ag producer, must meet one of the 4 applicant types. However, the definition of ag producer has been revised to look at the unique structure of tribes and tribal entities without regard to the day-to-day labor, management, and field operation, and the right to harvest. Within our toolkits, there's Appendix A that really discusses in detail how this can be met. Dan was correct. You know, I was around when Dan first came around in 2011, and we didn't have the direction. We now have the direction, and I really think this is an opportunity for Native tribes and tribal entities to really take advantage of this program. I guess I kind of talked about that already. So Greg, next slide. Next slide. So what are you know, Red Cliff and Forest County really hit the nail on the head with this. So there's 2 sides of the program. The planning grant is really there to, as Red Cliff said, to kind of take some of the financial burden off of an organization to determine whether or not the venture that you're looking at is a viable venture. You know, they looked at, you know, they knew what the fishermen were getting for the product that they were selling, and they felt that they should be able to get a higher value, but they didn't know that. They didn't have the real concrete numbers to say that this worked. So the feasibility study for Red Cliff's example showed that this was a viable venture. You know, and then they did take it to the next level, and they used our RBDG program to say that program the tribe could apply, and they were granted a rural business development grant to determine whether or not to help them with a business plan for the product, and thereby they were able to construct the fish processing facility, and are able to now, they're going to be able to use those documents to apply for the value-added producer grant. The second side is working capital. So that's when you know that you have a market. You know where you can go. You know what your price points are. You know where you can sell your product, and that it's a viable venture. Then you can apply for the working capital grant, and that's up to a $250,000 grant in order to do the processing of the product. It's not going to be for any of the bricks and sticks like we had talked when I talked about earlier. It's not going to be for the equipment. But one thing you have to realize is that while we can't finance that, we can finance the rest of it. So that would leave cash flow available in order for you to work on to pay for those bricks and sticks, the capital items that you need to purchase. Moving on.
Mike, let's go back just for a second here.
Yep.
There was a question came in that says, are intertribal organizations eligible?
Intertribal?
Yes.
Tribal organizations, yes, they would be. I mean, as long as they're producing an ag product. Variations of working capital. So we have 3 different really basic differences. Request of 50,000 or more for emerging markets. All applicant types are eligible, but co-ops, ag producers, and majority controlled have to apply under this one because they have to be going into an emerging market for their product. The second type, Greg, is 50,000 or more for market expansion, where the independent producers are the only ones that are eligible for this, where they have an existing value-added product and they're going to be expanding their market. This one you need, instead of an independent feasibility study, you must have a business plan or marketing plan. The prior one, you have to, you have to have an independent feasibility study and a business plan in order to show that's a viable venture. The third category is going to be a simplified application for those applicants under 50,000 for working capital. You don't have to have a feasibility study or business plan, but you have to be able to show that this is a viable venture, right? That, you know, the money that's going to be used it is going to, there's you know, through cash flow analysis or some type of income statements showing that this is going to be increase your customer base and revenue and help you out in your business. Next slide. So what are eligible uses of funds for working capital? I covered this a little bit before, but, you know, pay for the cost of the processing the raw material, packaging, labels, promotional materials, advertising, non-family labor wages. When I say non-family labor wages, the family labor or people that have are related, those could be used as part of your match requirements. Moving on. Again, kind of talked about this, but expenses related to ag production. So everything, what we have to understand and remember is this isn't an ag production program. This is everything post-harvest. So like with Dave's example, we can't take the hogs to the market. We can't pay for that, but we can pay to pick up the processed pork after the butcher has slaughtered and processed the hog. We can pay for the packaging and all those things. So kind of cover this. Greg, next slide. So hemp is a $2 million question, right? A lot of people want to grow hemp. In Wisconsin, there's a bunch of you need to look at this hyperlink here. You have and click on that, and it'll take you to what ag producer, what states and tribal organizations and entities have applied for a processing license to be approved under the 2018 Farm Bill. If the state you live in or your tribe has not applied and they're growing in accordance with the 2014 Farm Bill, unfortunately, you're not going to be eligible for any processing of hemp in this current cycle. The other thing that we get, there's a lot of discussion around is CBD oil. One of the things with value-added program, if you're using the CBD oil in any product that is for food consumption or pharmaceutical, that's probably not going to be eligible because you're not, the FDA has not approved that, and we need to be you need to be in accordance with FDA rules and regulations. If you're anything dealing with hemp on the fiber side, there's not going to be any issue whatsoever, or like the seeds, as long as it's not with the CBD oil in it. So that's kind of where I'm at. Greg, you want to take over and introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'll jump in here. Afternoon, everyone. My name is Greg York. I'm actually Mike's counterpart at the National Office of Rural Development. I've worked on the Value-Added Producer Grant for the past 10, 11 years in both Washington State and in California. And now I'm located with the National Office in DC administering the program. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about matching funds. So Mike mentioned a little bit about the COVID money that's coming up. So there's a little bit of difference that's going to be announced with that. But the standard for the Value-Added Producer Grant is that there's a one-to-one match. And the one-to-one match means that for every dollar we award in grant, you have to match $1 of your own money. There's several different ways to do so. One of the most common ways is by contributing raw commodities to the project. The commodity in its raw state, its unaltered before value-added processing state, is valued at something. Whatever that value is can be counted towards your match. In addition to that, your labor, family's labor, and we're talking about direct family, can be contributed to the project as well. And the value of that labor can go to offset match. And there is a limit on this one, and it's 25% of the overall project can come from in-kind labor. But, and this also causes a little bit of confusion when it comes to in-kind raw commodity. And people think that there's a restriction on that one. There is no restriction on commodity, only in-kind labor. So if you can make up most of or all of your matches of in-kind raw commodity and in-kind labor, you'll be good to go. However, if you cannot, there's also the option of looking at cash, and that can come in the form of loan, line of credit, however you're coming up with that, or through third-party cash or third-party in-kind contribution. Third-party, I think probably the most common way that's used is, say, in a feasibility study situation. Maybe the consultant that's preparing the feasibility study is donating part of their time or part of their fee for doing so. And that counts towards match as well as third party in kind. And I noticed a question came in on is the processing of hemp flower for a smokable product eligible? This is not CBD oil. Just kind of trying to think this through. What would be the benefits of that smokable product? I'm kind of leaning towards we'd have a rough time making that an eligible product, because anything that's ingestible right now with the FDA and where things currently lie would be ineligible. But if you're looking at things like textile materials, fabric, what have you, that are made from hemp, those are all good to go. Anytime you're ingesting something from the hemp plant, then that's where I think we're going to run into a little bit of trouble. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the methodologies. So to qualify for the value-added producer grant, there's 5 methodologies that you can choose from. The very most common of which is the change in physical state. So Mike, I believe earlier, used the jam or jelly example. So if you're taking your fruit, you're processing it into a jam or a jelly. That's a change of physical state. It can't be reversed. You can't go backwards. That qualifies all day long, and that's where most of the products come from. So if you're taking your cattle or your bison, buffalo, what have you, and you're processing them into some sort of packaged meat products, that works as well, and that would qualify under the change in physical state. Now, keep in mind, we're going to go through 4 more of these, and your product that you're producing might qualify for more than one of the methodologies. However, you only have to select one. You can select multiple, and if you select multiple, you have to explain each one and how your product meets that methodology, but you only need one to qualify. This is not a scoring criterion. We're basically just looking for qualification or eligibility of your project in this stage. So the next one is produced in a manner that enhances the value of an agricultural commodity. The most common and the most thought about are USDA organic or free range. If your product is produced in a manner that enhances its value, you'd be good to go and you'd be eligible to apply. The next one is physical segregation. This one and the previous one, the produced in a manner, are really kind of almost one in one. The example we like to use for the physical segregation is the GMO versus non-GMO corn. So if you have a product that is separated, so say GMO corn separated from the non-GMO corn during both the farming as well as the harvesting and then value-added marketing, you'd be good to go as well. The fourth option is farmer ranch-based renewable energy. So with this one, really what we're looking at is those anaerobic digesters. We do have some restrictions on this. As an example, we can't do wind, solar, geothermal, or hydro projects. But when it comes to anaerobic digesters, you're probably going to be good to go. There is on our website a flyer on the farmer ranch-based renewable energy, and it talks about some of the eligible expenses that can be incurred when you come in under this category. I think this is probably one of the most underutilized methodologies, and I think the reason for that is because we also have a Rural Energy for America program, which most people gravitate towards that just because of what can be paid for with that program versus this one. But please, by all means, take a look on the website if you have one of those projects, if you want to learn a little bit more about it. The next one and the final one is probably the most, well, it's definitely picking up steam faster than any of the others, which is the locally produced agricultural food product. So if you were growing a product or raising a product and you were selling it within 400 miles or within the state of which the product is produced, and you're getting a premium for it by selling it and branding it as a local food product, that in itself is enough to qualify as a methodology. All right, let's look a little bit at what happened in FY20 with the value-added producer grant funds. We had 512 applications come in. 366 of those were eligible. So you'll notice there's a big drop off between the 512 and the 366. I think more often than not, what happens here is, folks will fill out the application. They kind of take it and they go at it on their own. And I think that's where some of the mistakes come in, because there's definitely some do's and don'ts with this program, some things we can and can't do. And a lot of times there's some misunderstanding with what can and can't be done. If you work closely with the state staff for wherever you're located, they will help you make sure that you are not only running into ineligibility issues, but your budget and that is consistent with what we can cover with grant funds, as well as your matching funds. Because remember, grant funds and matching funds both have to be used for eligible purposes. So when you're talking about matching funds, and I probably should address this in the previous slides, if you've done real estate improvements, if you've done equipment purchases and that type of thing, unfortunately, we can't count that as match. We can only count the raw commodity, the cash, the in-kind labor, those types of things as match, because those are eligible uses of funds just like the grant funds are. So like I was mentioning, we have a pretty big drop off from application to eligibility. But then you'll notice that last year, and this will probably happen again this year with the level of funding we have, there were only a handful of applications that didn't get funded that were eligible. And what it came down to this last cycle was 50-point minimum requirement. If you met the 50-point minimum, you are more than likely to get funded. And we funded almost $58 million worth of projects last year. And that's based off of, I think, 66 million that we had in total funding last year. So, with 70-something million this year, it's a great year to apply. All right, so when the applicants apply, they have to decide, are they going to go the working capital or are they going to go the planning grant route? You'll see that by far, most people go for the working capital. I don't think that tells the whole picture though, because those that do come in for the planning grant, that can really go a long way to making sure that your project, especially if it's in a conceptual state, is really thought out, looked at by somebody else, a third party, and really given that stamp of approval that it's feasible, there's a market for it, there's a likelihood of success. And that can go a long way to a successful project, because if you do a planning grant one cycle and everything comes back all right, you did that feasibility study's positive, there's a likelihood of success with the project, you can come back the next cycle, apply for that working capital. And by doing that, you now have a blueprint from that planning grant to take and implement your project. And you can come in for the working capital funds the next cycle. However, if you decide to do the working capital right off the bat, by all means, you can do that. What we're looking for there, though, is we're looking for well thought out and defined plans that basically just need implementation cash, a little kickstart, so to speak, to get the ball rolling. So they do need to be well thought out and defined plans in order to qualify for working capital. Last cycle.
Greg, one thing on the planning grant, Dan hit on this in the beginning. Planning grants aren't always going to say that they're viable, right? It's a method by which the federal government is helping the entrepreneur take some risk. You're still putting money into this, and you're still going to be you have some skin in the game, but the federal government is saying, hey, you want to take a risk and you want to see whether or not something's viable. The planning grant takes away some of that risk. And if, I've had a couple where they weren't viable and people were upset and they thought we'd be mad that it wasn't viable. And it's like, no, not at all. It answered a question. And that's what grant funding is meant to do. It's meant to answer a question. It's meant to take away some of the financial risk from the entrepreneur in order to make him more viable. And and I think in one of the slides I had, it's not meant as a continuous funding, and that's true, but it's there to help you to start out. Most businesses, the failure rate in the first 3 to 5 years is pretty great. So this is there to help you over that hump. That's what really the intent of the program is. Thanks, Greg.
Right. Yeah, thanks, Mike. So you'll see last cycle, the FY 2020 cycle, the average grant awarded was 166,000. Working capital was 173 and planning was 35. You know, that 173, that's obviously an average. We get some pretty small grant requests sometimes. I've seen them as low as $5,000, $10,000. So the size of your project shouldn't determine whether or not you come out and go for the grant or not. Because we obviously get the $250,000 request as well, which is the maximum amount. But we can go small, we can go big. It's really dependent on the need of the project that you have. Now, we talked about applicant types earlier. Mike kind of defined out what they are. You can kind of see here what the different applicant types and what percentage of the applications that came in were from those applicant types. Independent producers, you know, obviously makes up the vast majority of them. But kind of keep in mind there that even if you're coming in as a cooperative, an agriculture producer group, a majority controlled producer-based business venture, it all kind of funnels right back down to independent producer anyway, because these entities, these other entity types, are made up of independent producers at the end of the day anyway. But the vast majority that come in are independent producers. Now, when we talk about awards with priority categories, you'll notice that there are some priorities given to different groups. We had 94 applications last year that were awarded that got no priority points whatsoever. But you'll notice on the far right of that, in red, there's the socially disadvantaged farmer ranchers. Tribal organizations would qualify under that and would qualify for priority points when applying. And that 90, I think, makes up roughly 25% of the applications that were awarded last year. So priority points can play a big part in helping you get additional points so that you have a better chance of getting awarded. Over the last several, 6 cycles, you can see the difference between those that applied with priority point preference and those that didn't in orange. I think it's almost, probably 2 to 1 or 3 to 1, excuse me, of applicants that are funded that get some sort of priority points versus don't get any at all. And I'm going to go back a slide here and kind of point something out. So when somebody's applying for priority points, in the application toolkit, there's some documentation and appendix to fill out that'll certify that you meet one of the priority point categories. If you meet more than one of these categories, you only need to select the one that is probably basically the easiest for you to fill out and certify, because we can only give priority one time, depending on which one of these categories you want to go for. So as an example, if you met the socially disadvantaged, but you also met the veteran, we can only give you the 5 points for one of them. So you only really need to fill out one of those appendixes. All right, talking a little bit about the award methodologies from 2020. Remember I said in the beginning, change in physical state, that one's huge. That's taking the raw commodity, altering it somehow or another, making something with it. Vast majority of the applications come in under that, 270 last year. But that locally marketed, the 45, that one's picking up steam every year. We seem to get more and more of those. And then the produced in a manner, that's, your organic, your grass-fed, those types of things. But keep in mind, this is the primary methodology that people selected when they applied for the grant. Some of these applied for more than one methodology. Some of the change in physical state also met the organic under the produced in a manner. So this doesn't tell the whole picture, but you can kind of see here that change in physical state is kind of the main way most people go. All right, let's talk a little bit about tools to apply. So on our website, and there's a link to it there, you'll find several different forms that are going to make your life a little bit easier when you're trying to apply. There's outreach fact sheets, and they can talk about things like locally produced food, harvesters, mid-tier value chains, as well as general information. And then there's also application toolkits, and there's 2 toolkits on the Value Added Producer Grant webpage, one for working capital and one for planning. Make sure you choose the appropriate one depending on what you're looking to apply for, because there are some subtle differences between the 2. Now, within the application toolkits is the application template. It will walk you through how to apply. And it's as simple as filling in a blank in some spots, checking a box in other spots, or adding narrative in some other sections. But as you're going through this, you're going to come up with questions. That's inevitable. We want to make sure you pass the eligibility phase and get to compete for the money. So I would suggest, and I would really encourage you, if you're thinking about applying, reach out to the state office staff sooner than later. Let them know you're thinking about applying. You're going to be filling out an application toolkit, and ask them if they're able to review your application, especially the budget section, because that's where a lot of the mistakes happen and where a lot of the errors that lead to ineligibility issues come up. Yeah, get with them early, and they will help you with your application process. Also embedded within that application toolkit, you're going to find links to all the forms you need, as well as links to things like the DUNS number registration, SAMS registration. If you have an alcohol, tobacco project, there's a link to the TTB site so that you can provide the appropriate documentation, all that stuff. Also a link I should have mentioned, this is new the last 2 cycles, there's a link to the Agricultural Marketing Service HEMP page, which tells whether or not your state or your tribe is operating with a 2018 Farm Bill plan, and then also the program regulations related to hemp. In the back of the application toolkit, you're going to find some appendices. We talked about this a little bit more. There's some for the priority point categories, there's some for the reserve funds, and then there's one back, I believe it's Appendix A, for the tribal applicants, where you fill in a few items and ask a few questions, and that helps us determine eligibility for the tribal project. The SAMS registration and the DUNS registration, like I mentioned before, links are provided in the application toolkit. You will need these to apply, so I would encourage you to go on early. Make sure you're getting the, make sure you're putting in your request for these, because I think it can take up to a week to 10 days to get your DUNS number back, I believe. I'm not sure about SAMS. I think that's pretty quick. Then I'm going to open it up to questions. I noticed that Andy had given a little bit more information on the CBD question that came out earlier. Andy is definitely a great resource for Mike and I when it comes to CBD and hemp projects. So if you have any more related to that, please let us know, or any other general questions. Now's the time. And while we're waiting to see if any questions come in, I'm just going to go ahead and punch it over here to the next slide so that Ted can talk a little bit about the Rural Business Development Grant. And then just to get into your question there, Lori, where is the website you go to for the applications? It's the Value Added Producer Grant website. After he goes through the Rural Business Development Grant and we go through the contact information slides, I'll put the website up for you. But it's, yeah, basically through the Rural Development website, and then you go to the Value Added Producer Grant webpage.
Thanks, Greg, and good afternoon, everyone. My name's Ted Bulow. I'm the Tribal Coordinator for USDA Rural Development. So thanks you all for participating today, and thanks for Mike and Greg and Dan and the folks from Red Cliff and Forest County for their presentations. Wanted to quickly do a commercial for our Rural Business Development Grant, which is a program that federally recognized tribes are eligible for directly. It also has a set aside for projects that are benefiting members of federally recognized tribes. That's at about $4 million each year. The program revolves around business creation, job creation, and saving businesses and jobs in rural and tribal communities. It's a pretty flexible program, and as has been mentioned, it can complement some of the ineligible costs in the value-added producer grant program. Through that $4 million tribal set aside, we tend to fund between 25 and 35 projects a year. And the Rural Business Development Grant set aside funds function alongside the traditional program, and tribal applications can actually compete for both. So first you'd get a chance to compete for the set aside funds, and if your project weren't selected, you can also then compete for the traditional program, which is allocated through our rural development state offices. So whether it's for the set aside or for the traditional program, you work with your local rural development program staff. So if you don't know who that is, reach out to myself or Greg or Mike, and we're happy to get you in touch with them. And the most important point is that we recently extended the application deadline for this fiscal year. So applications for both the traditional and the set-aside programs are due on March 31st. So we've got a couple weeks left in February, and then all of March to get your applications in. So thanks very much, Greg. Back to you.
Okay, so contact information for Mike and I, as well as IACC. Used to belong to an organization called IACC. Contact information for IAC is there, as well as Ted Bulow. I'm gonna just switch this over real quick away from the PowerPoint and put up the Value Added Producer Grant webpage, just show you real quick. So if you go to rural development, it's basically www.rd.usda.gov. You search through programs, business programs. It'll take you to all the different business programs that we have. Click on the Value Added Producer Grant program. And from there, you'll see several different tabs. Encourage you to read through the information on there, and to apply, if you click that one, you can find the application toolkit as well for both the planning and the working capital right there in the center. And the link is included within the PowerPoint here, I think in one of the first couple slides. So pretty sure we're going to share the PowerPoint with you as well. So I'll leave it open here just for a couple more minutes.
Hey, Greg, there is a question. There is a question out there on in-kind. I don't know if you want to take a stab at that. You had covered in-kind.
Yeah, let me take a look here. Sorry. Okay, sorry, it took a second to get it up here. Okay, what may be an in-kind match other than direct cash in terms of marketing as a value-added eligible use, promotion, advertising? Can the value of the product itself be used as an in-kind match? Can labor of the marketing team be used as an in-kind match? So when you're looking at in-kind, I'm going to kind of take a step back from this question and talk about in-kind just a little bit more. So when you're looking at in-kind, you probably want to break it down into one of two categories for the most part. One is either going to be in-kind raw commodity. So the value of the raw commodity in its harvested state. So if you were harvesting corn, once you have that corn harvested before you ground it into some sort of meal, corn meal or something like that you're going to use, the value of that corn in its harvested state is what we can allow as in-kind match. We cannot allow the value of the corn meal that you would ultimately produce after the fact as the value. It's the value of the raw commodity. And then when you're talking about labor, we're talking about in-kind family labor or in-kind, labor from the owner of the farm themselves. Whatever the value of that work that you do in contribution to the project can be used as in-kind match and can be used to offset your match requirement, but there is a cap on that type of in-kind of 25%. So it's 25% of the overall project. If you have a $100,000 grant and a $100,000 match, you have a $200,000 project, so $50,000 is the max in-kind labor that you can contribute for that type of in-kind. And then from time to time, and it is rare, but from time to time, someone else wants to contribute labor. Maybe from, I think the example here is the marketing team. That could be eligible as in-kind, but more often than not, when you're paying, when it's somebody on the marketing team, that's somebody that works for you or works for the organization. And usually you're going to be paying them, and that's an eligible expense for the grant side to pay them. So when we think about in-kind, we're usually thinking about in-kind from the owner or their family member or the raw commodity that's being used as in-kind. Hope that answers that question.
I'll add in one thing here, Greg, on the Red Cliff planning grant. They actually, one of the contributors to the grant, actually there's two contributors to the grant that believed in the project so much that they took a portion of their salary and pledged it as in-kind match for the people that were the third parties that were doing part of the feasibility study. So that does happen from time to time, as you said. And then there's a question out here on what is a DUNS number? And Greg, while we're talking here, there's a request to put the contact slide back in place. So if we can go back to that real quick, thank you. what is a DUNS number? It's a Dun and Bradstreet number. You need to have that number in order to get your SAM number. So the first step is to get your DUNS number. It's a Dun and Bradstreet number. I know it sounds kind of quirky, but you need to have that in order to get a SAM number. One thing I would say to you with the SAM number, as you're going through SAM registration, there's a ton of websites out there. Make sure you go to the one that we have listed in here, because there's ones out there that if you get into it, you know, they say they'll help you apply for the SAM number. Yeah, give me $500 and we'll help you. There is no charge. So never pay, never, ever, never, ever, never, ever pay for a DUNS number or a SAM number. You got into a wrong website, contact us. We'll make sure you get into the right one, because there isn't a cost for that. The other question is, can a nonprofit tribal program apply if they have sites in 2 states? Nonprofit tribal. I would need to know what that looks like, because by definition, this is to be a for-profit organization. I need to understand a little bit more what you're looking at there. If you're a tribal organization in 2 states, I would apply where you're producing the product. That definitely, a tribal organization, 2 states, would not be an issue, but the nonprofit might be. So.
I think that might probably part of that determination be, are you selling a product now? I mean, is because that's one of the challenging things, is that sometimes nonprofits actually, you know, maybe having income coming in. So yeah, I think more information on the exact details of
Yep.
that scenario is going to be important. I wanted to make one other quick note. I had been in contact with Native American Ag Fund earlier today. NAF, the Native American Ag Fund, was created out of remaining Keep Seagull funds. If anyone on here is a current NAF grantee, you may be able to use some of that NAF to go toward your matching funds requirement. But that's going to be really a determination that you'll need to make with NAF. But I just wanted to make that mention. And for the future, if people are, you know, if groups, tribes are looking for, you know, looking for some of these support resources, I know that Native American Ag Fund has supported tribes who are looking at value-added products. So be another one to look at for the future.
There's one other question about there saying, is CDB covered or not? CBD is going to be a challenge right now in this cycle until FDA approves the use for in anything ingestible or pharmaceutical. So it is going to be a challenge at this point in time.
Okay, great. Well, it looks like we've answered most of the questions. We're a little bit over an hour. I want to thank our panelists, thank Rural Development for sharing background on this program. I want to thank our tribal producers who shared some of their perspective as well. This recording will be available on the IAC YouTube channel, Indian Ag. Just search on YouTube. Hopefully we'll have it up later today or tomorrow. You see our contact information there. Get in contact if you have questions. Thank you. And Dan, we'll let you know when we have more information on the funding cycle, how that is going to play out. For that second round of that 35 million that only has the 10% match. Right, yeah. Mike? Yeah. Thank you.